When I do that, it brings up my Zoom and it says live and it's preparing to live stream the meeting.
Yeah, but
Now
it's
what?
not streaming it.
Just hang on a second. There you go. There's what it's showing.
Yeah,
to me.
it says it's live now. Yes, it is.
Watch live now. Okay.
You are live. It's on.
I turned it back on again.
Jim, you're on. I'm watching it. You're being live streamed. Go ahead and start talking.
Okay. It's got a delay on it because I'm talking right now, and what I'm seeing is just me looking at my cell phone. Anyway, I'm so sorry, everyone. If you'll try us again, what we'll try to do later is use the recording that is on Zoom that we have, and if we can figure a way to link that recording into to where we are right now, live streaming on YouTube, then you'll be able to see the whole show if you'll come back either later tonight, but probably tomorrow sometime to give Phil and Pat a chance to see if they can figure out what went wrong. We don't know what happened, why we didn't have live streaming, but we think that we've got it corrected now. And thank you so much for putting up with us a little bit. It's a live show and these things happen. So Pat, Phil, thanks so very much for getting it started for us. And now we'll go back to have Phil tell us what he was telling us before we stopped this to try to get everybody on YouTube in the family. Phil?
I am muted. Thanks, Jim. Continuing on. I assume I'm sharing a screen. You can see a PowerPoint slide now.
Yeah, we got it.
Cool. So if I click there on the shapes, you see all these shapes down here. And the whole concept with this is all of these shapes can be used, and I'll show you later on some of them how you can modify them. But for example, if you want an octagon, there's an octagon, and if you move it like this, you can get this way, or if I hit the shift key, then it gets locked and it's an octagon. And so you'll be able to see it come back and get that. So the beauty of this, now you'll notice the first time this happens, when I started a shape, it took me into this shape formatting tab, because there are different tabs up here at the top, and you should click on these to kind of understand them. I talked about the view tab up here. This is where you view and you add in the rulers and the guides. So if you want guidelines, you can put guidelines on, or you can take guidelines off. I'll show you that a little bit later. But the shape format will come up when you establish a shape. And these are tools that let you manipulate the shape. And I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time talking about these. Once you get in here, you can play with them. But over here, this is shape fill. So if you want to change the fill, you click on that and you can change the color of the fill. If you want to change the outline, you can change the color of the outline. So, you've got all of those capabilities there on any object. Like I said, if I right click on the object, it opens that right click. Remember, really important, opens this. You notice I've got a set of tools up here at the top that I can change the text and different things in the object. But I can also click down here and go to size and position. And that opens this little toolbar over here that lets me look at size. It also lets me look at things like the fill and the line. So you can look at the line here, and you notice this is a 1-point line, what's going around this on the outside. And if you come down here, I can put a compound on it that's a double compound like that. And if I make this 10-point width, so I got a nice border around it. So again, if you're trying to make an old sign, you can take one of these shapes and create a pattern that makes an old sign really easily. And again, this stuff isn't hard. I know everybody looks at it and you see lots of stuff happen. When you go in and play with this for an evening, you'll find it's not that hard. This comes up and you say, oh, shape fill. Oh, text fill. Oh, if I've got text, the same thing. How does it work? Click and you see format shape. Over here, you get size. So this is the size of the shape. Again, I can lock the aspect ratio, and that way, if I want to make it, you know, over here in terms of back to the size, if I want to make it 3 inches, then it makes it completely 3 inches. So, you know, and again, there are lots of shapes up here. There are basic shapes, you know, rectangles, basic shapes, arrows, you know, just about anything you could want in terms of shapes are here. And then, like I said before, the other thing I wanted to show you here, just make sure, is this idea that if you have another shape, you know, so let's say, for example, I don't know, an octagon is probably not a great shape to use, but let's say, for example, a very simple thing you might want to do. Let's take a rectangle, and we take a rectangle, and let's say inside of the rectangle, we want to make it, we're going to make a safety placard. So we want to make it orange. That doesn't look like a very good orange. Gee, I don't really like any of the oranges that are there. Well, if you click down here on more fill colors, you get lots of choices. If the choices there are custom colors, and I'm going to show you how to use that in a future version. I'm going to show you how to get a tool that lets you pick the colors off of something on your screen and match them. And it's really great where if you've got something that you brought in that has a color border, you can match it with what's next to it. But you can also pick standard colors here. I'm going to make this bigger here so you guys can see it. And I can pick colors. So, you know, if I'm doing, for example, let's say a road safety sign, I might want this orange here or this yellow here. Say this yellow here. So I do that, and now I've got the sign. And let's say I want to not have a border on the sign because it's printed yellow all the way to the edge. So I click on the sign, and then I want to go to the border. That's the outline. So I click on shape outline, and you'll notice I can pick all the colors, but right here it says no outline. So you notice now there's no outline on that box. But if I want to put a box inside of that, I can do something really interesting. So let's say I want a border around that. And it turns out that the sign I looked at, oh, you notice this background stuff, and I keep clicking on it. Remember I told you how you get rid of that? How do you get rid of that? You go up here to the home page, you come over here and you click on layout, and you click on blank, and that gets rid of that background. So you don't have to worry about it anymore. So remember, that's where you go figure out how to lay stuff out. So I want to put inside here, and what I did, I went and looked at it, and I realized they had rounded corners. So one of the things, if you noticed up here in the tools, there's a rectangle with rounded corners. You'll be able to see these better on your machine. My resolution is set pretty high. So now I want to make that fit exactly in there and look good in terms of how it's going to work for this sign. So to do that, what do? I need to do a few things to it. The first thing is I really don't want any fill. So again, I come back up here and I look for it says shape fill, no fill. I want to make the line black, and I want to make it a little thicker. And I can do that either with the line tool over here with the weight, or if I click on shape outline, notice down here it says weight, and I can pick the weight of the line. So now I want to make this line exactly fit inside this rectangle. So what's the easy way to do that? I look at this rectangle and I say, well, let's lock the aspect ratio on that rectangle. Let's make it 5 inches. And it's 5 inches there. And you notice when I did that, on the other dimension, it's 6.94. So I'm going to copy that. And the reason I'm going to copy that is I know that if I make the height 5, if I make the width that dimension, that little black box I drew will be exactly the same size, but more importantly, the same ratio dimensions as the yellow box. So I click on this. Now I click over here on size, and what I want to do is I want to make this 5 inches here. That's going to make it that way. And then I go in here and I copy in those numbers I copied from the other drawing, and now I'm going to paste those in. So on a computer, that's Control-C copies, Control-V paste. So you just learn those real quick. It's a great way to learn this. So I hit Control-V, and that puts in that 6 inches. And now when I hit the carriage return, oh, it didn't put it in. Oh, well, let me go back over here, 6.94. I must not have done it right. And now I'm going to come over here. See, even if you know what you're doing or think you know what you're doing, you make mistakes. There we go. So now these are exactly the same size, but what I can do is if I click up here and I hit the shift key, I can make this a little smaller. So now I can just bring it over here. And the easy way to do this, by the way, is you bring it right to the center and you center these. If you want to move it one way or the other, little quick tip, click on it and then hit the shift key and it will just move along that axis one way or the other. And you notice it'll stop. It'll kind of hold itself right on the axis line. So now if I move this over and I put it on the axis line, which you notice, oh, hang on. I want to just make sure I get that one. And I can use the arrow key to move it over there. So you notice those are now exactly the same. And one of the things when you've got these irregular shapes like this, you won't see this on a square because you just manipulate the whole shape. This edge here, how do you change the dimension of that? Well, you notice there's a little tool right up here and you can go like that. So now all we got to do is put some text in there, but you'll notice that if I take this object here, right, this is my line. If I say arrange, send to back, now it's behind that. So again, I want to be able to arrange that and bring it to the front. So anyway, that was kind of what I wanted to talk about today. Just kind of, so I guess just some feedback from you guys is this kind of interesting to learn how to do this stuff, or does everybody kind of know how to do this already?
Well, I don't. I don't know about everybody else, but
No,
I'm
I'm learning.
Phil,
I
I'm
had
a-
to use it at work, so I'm familiar with it, but it is a powerful tool that comes free on most computers.
Yeah, it's a really good drawing tool. Look this way, and I'm showing you how to do things like, how you can create 1200 DPI images so that you can print them at really high resolution. So,
Phil,
Practice makes perfect.
Jim?
So.
Jim, I think you can cancel me for the end of the month because Ed's just taken all my ammunition away from me.
No, he has not the way.
No, I haven't. No, this is a whole different kind of thing. It's
Nice try, Father.
It's exactly the same.
yeah, it's very much the same kind of thing, but it's just kind of learning those tools. And the thing that's so interesting about this is that when you kind of understand this concept of you're just putting objects on the screen, they give you objects. But the cool thing is, I'm going to show you in a little while that you can edit those objects and do just about anything you want with them. And
Phil, what I would show, Phil?
yes.
What I use it for, I'm a wizard with PowerPoint too, but what I would do is I would show them how to bring in to make like billboards and signs.
Yep.
I would bring in, you can find some, I'll type in Google, for example, 1920, 1930 advertisements. Then I'll copy, paste them into PowerPoint. I'll size them. I'll put borders on them. I'll rust them. I'll screw around with it. But you can, there's an infinite supply of signs on Google, and you bring them into PowerPoint. You've seen some of my work. It's sprinkled all over the layout. They cost nothing.
Right. Yeah, it's the same. It's the same thing. It's just those of us who know how to do it. And Larry, I'd love to have you do one of these, come in and do one as well. Because the same, they're actually, if you go back to those 10 things I put up earlier, one of them was the idea of how to do that. And one of the things is learning those tricks of how to do Boolean searches in a way that you find stuff. There's kind of a set of techniques to finding things on Google sometimes. But you're right. You're absolutely right.
And see, it's these kinds of things, guys, that you all may know hands down. And it's just kind of second nature. You want to look for something, you know exactly what button to press or how to do it. A lot of us, like me particularly, I have no idea what I'm doing.
I have a whole box. I can go reach for it. Whole box of things I've printed. I'll just bring images into PowerPoint and just fill it up with 1920, 1930 signs. And then I'll print them out. And then whenever I want to put up a sign, I just go in with scissors, cut one out and deal with it. But I have a whole box of them, They cost nothing.
Yeah, what I'm going to do is show later is how you take them and you can do a high resolution image that when you print it out in a 6x4, which is less than 50 cents, about 45 cents out here. So probably most of the country is 35 cents to get a matte image printed out. And, you know, in O, that's a whole whack of signs. In HO, it's a whole bunch.
And I,
And, you know, so yeah. Anyway, Jim, let's throw it back to you. I think what you're hearing is that, you know, this is a great set of techniques. And it's not intended for the folks who know how to do it. It's intended for the folks that kind of don't know how to do it.
I'm enjoying it, Phil. I haven't used this yet. This is Larry McDonald speaking, and yeah, I'm interested in this. And then even if several of you have a different slant or approach, that'd be
Oh
great.
yeah, no, exactly. I'd love to bring that in. Like I said, Tom, I've got a session where we're going to talk about exactly that.
so there's like I can't really show it because it's impossible. But
Yeah.
building just, I'll show you, I'll do a slide for it next time. Yeah.
Yeah.
Your
Anyway,
question, Phil?
So next time we're going to talk about how you change the slide ratios and the slide sizes.
Yeah.
So for example, if you want to do, you know, a high resolution print or a really large print, and I'll show you how, you know, for example, I use the 56-inch wide slide to be able to print out very large images for certain use cases like backdrops. I'll show you how to do that, how to do resizing.
Can you also show us how to get it down to the scale that we model, whether we're in?
Oh, I
HO
will. Oh, no, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
We're going to walk through that. It's kind of first just learning how to use the tools that are in there.
Yeah.
And then we'll work on how you do scales and scale ratios and stuff in it. And so, you know, I'll bring up, I didn't bring any of those things. I'll bring up some sheets of printouts. The same thing in that, you know, Tom's got some, others have some. Be great to bring that together, things you can do and add in techniques. Larry, it'd be great to have you do the technique on, you know, how you do the rusting. One of the things I'll show you is the technique of how when you do lettering and slides, you can actually make the lettering semi-transparent so that you actually see the model underneath, so that you actually have the impression of worn paint. So, you know, you can actually do that as well, those kinds of things. I'll show you how to do that. So
Well, I'm looking forward to it, Phil, because
hopefully it'll be fun. And like I said, love to have, you know, each of you, if you want to put one together, that would be a great thing to, you know, put a session together and talk about, hey, this is something I did that's different as we get into it.
Now, is this something, these programs that you're talking of, these are free, right? These are just on everybody's computer anyway?
It's not so much free, but kind of depending on where you bought your computer, it's probably there and free.
Okay,
Or you get it from work and it's free, or just a lot of people have access to it.
I
A
got
lot of
it.
computers have it.
Yeah.
PowerPoint is part of the Microsoft Office
Yeah.
suite.
Okay,
And if your company or your office has that, you have PowerPoint there at work. It can be expensive because you have to pay either monthly or yearly for the use of Microsoft now, the Office suite. And Inkscape is free, and you can do exactly
Right.
the same stuff on Inkscape that Ed was describing in PowerPoint. Those who have PowerPoint, though, don't need to get Inkscape because you've got the same tools. So anyway, you have to keep that in mind, that Microsoft Office can be very expensive if you don't
Yep.
have it already.
Yeah. If you
Father
don't
Ron-
have it, it's expensive.
but Father Ron, I'm not going to let you off the hook.
I understand.
Nice try,
Well,
Paul.
it's good to see how, see, that's the thing is then you really have a choice of tools, guys. If you got PowerPoint, you can use PowerPoint. You can use Inkscape, or you can use the Google Sheets is another tool that's very similar.
Okay.
So anyway, now back to you, Jim.
Okay, Phil, thank you so much. And for everybody else that made comments, thank you too. Yeah, because obviously I think this is going to be something that's interesting, and we're all going to learn an awful lot. I know I will. Well, listen, now I want to turn to a gentleman that I have the utmost respect for, Mark Pogendorf. Mark owns a hobby shop out in California. He's a member of the National Retail Hobby Shop Association. And he is the host of our hobby shop, local hobby shop segment on our shows once a month. So Mark, I'd like to run first, before I really introduce you, the promotional piece of video we have for the association.
This is a great family,
And I hope the people that are newer to this organization, to this NMRA, realize what a great family we're building.
Since its inception over 25 years ago, NMRA's mission has always been about
collaborating with hobby retailers to foster leadership in the hobby community. Bringing hobby stores together to help one another is what NMRA is all about.
There is strength in numbers, and NMRA's members are shops, just like yours and mine. From the very small mom and pop shop to multi-store franchises and everywhere in between.
You know, this is the founding part of this program we have here, founded on fun. So let's remember when they come in your stores, they're there for fun.
There are many great benefits to being a member of NMRA, from a great credit card program, discounts on shipping, and a members-only Facebook page.
NMRA is our voice in this industry, and it is up to all of us to make sure that there is strength in our voice.
For every member that joins NMRA, our voice becomes louder and clearer. Your support of NMRA is vital to the growth of the retail sector of our industry.
And now I'd like to introduce Mark. Mark, welcome. Thank you so much for being here this evening.
Thanks, Jim. Thanks for having me back again. Hope everything's good with you. So tonight I'd like to introduce Brian. He owns a hobby shop not too far from us called Loose Caboose. So Brian, are you there?
Yeah, howdy, Mark. Howdy, all.
How you doing? Well, Brian, the reason I brought you on the show is because you have a retail hobby shop, and as sure you can see from that clip, we want to promote retail hobby shops. So why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about your store and what you do, what you offer.
Well, I am the third generation owner of Loose Caboose Hobbies. That's in Napa, California. So, you know, the place that a lot of that wine comes out of. We're a full line hobby store. So we started model railroad, 100% model railroading. And then after the other hobby store in town closed down, it was a couple years after we opened, we kind of expanded into general hobby. And then over the last, 15, 20 years or so, we've slowly integrated games, the tabletop miniature games and board games and all that kind of stuff into the hobby store as well. So we are literally a full line hobby shop with a very diverse product load, but I would say we're still about 30% trains, which is a good call out to how we started.
Well, great. What do you now? Do you have an online presence? Do you just have the brick and mortar store? How do you get to your customers, or how do you get them to come in the door?
Right now we are, I would say 99.9% not online. We've got a website that looks like it came out of 1997, and I have a very small Facebook presence that's on my 2023 goal list to expand, along with Instagram and all the other fun social media aspects, because that is a big thing that is important for retailers, having that social media reach.
Great. Now, what product lines in the model train world do you offer at your store?
So we carry, as far as scales, NHO, OMG. And for, in and HO, it's all the usual suspects, a lot of Athearn, a lot of Atlas, some Kato, Broadway Limited, the stuff. We're big into the in-scale Unitrack from Kato. That stuff is a wonderful product. And then obviously the Atlas sectional stuff in both scales. When we get up to O scale, pretty much is a Lionel partnership, but that's the most stable, and O scale's the most interesting scale in terms of standardization.
Right.
So you either go real big and real diverse in O, or real focused, and we're focused. And then G scale, in the past we actually did a big bit of G scale, and as G scale has kind of waned a little bit in recent years,
Right.
We don't have as much as I'd like to have, but we definitely still support the scale.
Well, good. Okay. And then what do you, as a brick and mortar, what's one of the biggest problems you try to solve as far as being a brick and mortar store? What's one of those big hurdles you got to go through?
Well, I mean, I don't think a day off is a proper answer.
I know that one well.
Yeah, right. But you know, I think it's just a matter of really balancing your profit margins by being competitive with the internet, but also being able to put enough profit in your pocket to pay rent and hopefully yourself a touch.
Right. Now, do you offer repairs or installations of anything? Do you any other associated services?
So I do repairs in radio control.
Okay.
We have done repairs in trains, but it's third party. And my last HO repair person moved to Oregon right after COVID hit a couple years ago. So I currently don't have a whole lot of train repaired that's not just refer out. But yeah, we repairs, you know, that's somewhere where you can generate extra income that's done on your time.
Right. Yeah, it can be a bit of a pain. So anybody have any questions for Brian as far as the store?
I do. Brian, of the different product categories that you carry in your store, where are the modelers? What are modelers building these days? Are they building airplanes? Are they building trains? Are they building cars? What are the modelers building?
So that's a good question, and it's pretty diverse. I would say, you know, the old train guys are still modeling hard. The old model kit guys are still modeling hard. You know, we sell a lot of old military birds and a lot of armor, and then a lot of the 25th scale plastic automobiles as well. And then they call it Gunpla, but that's the Gundam plastic models. I refer to them as the giant space robots on the wall. But those are really great for the younger folks because it's something that calls out to them. It's something that they see, you know, that's and getting them into that gets them experience in the modeling world. They will very much do dioramas, and then, you know, I've seen them make the transition to more traditional plastic models. So yeah, I think even in RC, not to go along with it, but in radio control there are certain contingents that really go scale in a very hard way. The guys that do the RC rock crawling, those guys are big scale guys. And the guys that do RC drift, you know, on-road drifting,
Right.
those guys are also big into scale. So there's a lot of modeling that happens around the hobbies.
Brian, what can modelers do to help the hobby shop owner?
Oh, I think it's just a matter of a little bit of communication. You know, if I don't have what you're looking for, let me know. Not necessarily let me get it for you. I'm happy to do that, but I understand in today's world, you may not want to wait the 10 days it's going to take me to turn that around. So, right. You know, but if I don't know that you're looking for a set of Pegasus Daytons, just as a random thing,
right,
I'm not going to order those in ever. So communication's a big thing. But I think also just kind of remembering that your local hobby store is there. As the third generation owner in a store that has been in the community here in Napa for 28 years, you know, there are guys who walk in the door who, I haven't been here in over a decade. It's really great to be back. And And I've driven by this place for 12 years straight. And this is my first time in. You hear that kind of stuff all the time. And just being involved in your community, we do a lot of things. Well, like next month is Paint the Town Blue. The Cope Foundation out here with child abuse runs a big campaign all April. And we're heavily involved with that. A lot of the different wine auctions and things like that. We'll slip Lego sets into those gift baskets, and it's just ways to keep yourself out there and stay in contact with your customer base.
Got it. Thank you.
Well,
Yeah,
great.
thank you.
So, are you finding like in the model train world, we're seeing a lot of younger modelers coming into the hobby? Are you seeing that in your store?
I have a few kids that are regular and very into it. But I wouldn't say that I've got a wealth of adolescents that are coming in that have a big interest. Kids, yes, but when that kid discovers other things in life, do they stick with the trains? And so I've got a few guys that have stuck with the trains even in their teen years. And then I would say that there's a decent amount of guys that come in their 20s and 30s that are also into the hobby. And so there's some young blood.
Well, that's good. That's good to hear. So what are your hours, and how do the people get a hold of you?
Well, we are Tuesday through Saturday, 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. and Sundays 12 to 5. We do close on Mondays. Makes that day off and or the bookkeeping day, but and then as far as getting a hold of us, you can email us at loosecabooshobbies@gmail.com, or you can always give us a call on that telephone thing, and that's 707-258-1222, or as my grandfather said, 1222, right? So
that's great.
Yeah.
Cool.
So yeah, but standard stuff. You can also find us on Facebook, but like I said, that page isn't as developed as it should be.
Okay. Well, great. Well, anybody else have any other questions for Brian? He's got a really nice store over there. I've been in a few times. It's a really neat store. If you get a chance to go over and visit, I highly recommend it.
Brian, are you looking for modelers outside your area to buy from you? Or are you just concentrating on modelers who are coming in the front door?
Currently, we're pretty focused on our walk-in traffic. Something that I would like to do, again, future plans. I just took over here about 6 months ago. But future plans, I would very much like to have a website up with a live inventory from my point of sale system. I think for all of us hobby stores, particularly plastic model and train oriented stuff, there's a big opportunity to have some of the really cool stuff that isn't regularly available through most channels available to hobbyists. So that's definitely something that I'd like to do, but no, it's pretty much in store.
Brian, let me ask you this. What about the relationship of the hobby shop owner to both the manufacturers and the distributors? You talk about that relationship a little bit, because if that relationship, whatever that relationship is for the hobby shop owner, it's basically the same for the modeler, because from that standpoint, we're in this together.
Oh, absolutely. I think in a lot of ways, the manufacturers and distributors, and a lot of times those are one and the same in today's world. But I think that for the most part, they see it that way too. I would go as far as to say, I feel like 95% of the time it feels that way. There's always those things that happen where you think, well, you could be a little bit more on my side, or is there really a reason that you're showing X in stock on your website, but I can't order it from you?
Right.
Those those little things that kind of get under your skin. But I really do think that the manufacturers know, even with Amazon and the online numbers, we're still the guys that push the majority of the product. And you don't, I'll bet you that, and this is just pulling a manufacturer, we all know how locomotive pre-orders from everybody go, right?
Yes.
I mean, we're over a year from actual pre-order to delivery.
Yeah.
Most of those guys aren't pre-ordering that locomotive on Amazon waiting a year. They're pre-ordering it with guys like me and Mark. And then, you know, a year from now, we'll be able to fulfill it for them. They know that. And I feel like for the most part, my relationship with them is very good, and they value the fact that we do business with them. I don't feel it's combative.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Good. All right. Trying to think if there's any other questions. I can't think of anything off the top of my head. Well, I really appreciate. Pardon?
Mark, thank you so much for bringing Brian to our attention. And Brian, thank you so much for being here with Mark tonight. I've thoroughly enjoyed the discussion.
Yeah, no, thank you guys. I appreciate the opportunity, and I will, you know, have to tune in a little more regularly. This is the first time actually I've been here, and there's some cool stuff, boys.
Well, I hope you do come back. You're welcome anytime. And if you'll subscribe to our website, newtracksmodeling.com, then you'll get a weekly email with the login links and be able to join us whenever you can.
There we go. That's fantastic. Appreciate it very much.
No problem. Thanks again. I'll talk to you soon, Brian.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Mark, I can't thank you enough for doing this. I thought that was a great interview you had with Brian, and a hobby shop that I frankly had never heard of before.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm trying to do, is get some of the hobby shops that haven't been heard of to get these guys out in front of the general public, so to speak, and work it that way. Because there are certain ones, as you and I know, that are everybody knows the name. So I'm trying to go around that, which, as we know, can sometimes be a little more difficult to get those people. But I'm persevering in that department heavily.
Well, I think you're doing a great job. By the way, I saw where your friend Stephen Elliott was elected president of the association.
Yes.
And I read in the magazine, the association's magazine, his comments about what his goals as president were. And I sent him an email that if he thinks that our show can help him achieve his goals, just let us know about it. And I hope you'll pass that along to him too.
Yeah, in fact, I got to talk to Steve this week. So Steve's been a great proponent of this industry. I'm really glad that he's so close to my store, and he's now the president. So I've got a local ear to bend on, so to speak, and work with. And Steve is a great guy, and he's definitely a good proponent of all hobbies and our industry in general. And I think things are going to do nothing but go upward. And one last quick note: next weekend, the banner will be in Salt Lake City at the Great American Train Show. So
how's that going? I mean, you still getting
it's going good. In fact, I had a couple people ask about the nonprofit status, and I told them at the time it was no. So now I can with pride tell them, yes, we have our nonprofit status, and give us lots of money.
Absolutely. The more the merrier.
Yeah, exactly.
Mark, thanks so much for helping us, and thanks
No problem.
for doing this segment. You have a nice
No problem,
weekend.
Jim. I appreciate it. I really enjoy doing it. So we'll keep it up.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, take care.
Well, now I want to turn to another regular on our show, Martin Breckbilt, NMR, who is building a maintenance away car for us. Martin, welcome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jim.
Can't hear you, Martin.
Are you there?
I'm here. Are you?
I'm debating it.
Both.
So it's unclear as yet. Let's see if I can get my screen to share. How's that working?
Building cars.
There we go. I got it right the first try. It's so I haven't been here for a while, but it's oddly enough, I'm scratch building another maintenance away car. Fancy that. Maintenance away car number 312, I think, or whatever number it is this week. Next week, it'll be a different number.
Right.
So let's start at the beginning. Well, I'm going to skip forward because that's where my starting point was, because I had a stack of these prefabbed flat car blanks sitting on my back, in the back of my bench. And we're going to come back to this probably, I don't know, a month or 2 or 3 in the future, which somebody named Jim twisted my arm into presenting something about underbody brake details and the confabulations I go through on installing these things and where you buy parts and pieces and bits and bobs and how you put them together, and how not to avoid self-medicating after you go insane from doing this. So that said, and that doesn't include the truss rod stuff, because I know I did a show just about truss rods once. So that's the starting point. And I do prefab 3 or 4 of these at a time sometimes, or more, and I just stack them up in the back of my bench and figure I'll use them next week, next month, well, probably not much further out than next month. So I'm going to cut 2 sides out. It's just plain old scribe siding. Actually, this is scraps, because you can see I glued them up together here. I don't, my cursor's going to work. It does. And you can see a glue line there. But I know where the glue lines are. I don't throw away scraps. I reuse them. I have bags and boxes and all kinds of things. Whatever it came out of, it goes back into it. I know which one is which, so they stay pretty well close to matched. 2 ends, they're strangely enough the width of a car. The sides are taller than the ends because they're going to extend over the sides of the flat car and cover up the sides. So they need to be a little bit longer. So assembling this might be a little tricky for some, because you can't just lay it right side up on your flat work surface. You get a really sharp knife and a really good ruler and a straight edge and a right angle tool, and you can mark out where your windows and doors go. I'm fairly arbitrary on this to some extent. Yeah, no, there is no prototype for what I'm doing. This is seat of the pants. Those are Tichy castings. It's a 5-panel door, and I think those are actually work car windows. Tichy actually makes work car windows. So yeah, I buy a lot of those just for fun. I don't like making windows if I can help it. But yeah, just mark these all out, the width of the width of the back of the casting, and cut them out. I'm using a number 22 or 23 scalpel on a number 11 scalpel blade on a straight edge. No blood was spilled in the course of this. Open the holes up, test fit things, make sure they fit. I usually cut things a little small, because if you cut it too big, that's a problem, because then you have to go back and fill the hole up. And filling the hole, making a bigger hole is a lot easier than filling a hole. So if I make it a little narrow, that's okay. We'll just take the number 11 scalpel and shave off a few tenths of a millimeter until the casting drops in snugly. You don't want to force it. You don't want it to fall out either. So once you have that done, we've got these parts. So just for fun, I put framing around the windows to simulate that these might actually slide across and to open, as opposed to anything else. They are flat windows in the glass anyhow. So I've just added that to it. That's probably a HO 2x4. I use a lot of HO lumber, scale lumber in my O-scale cars, basically because if the size looks good and it fits the space, it's the right size. I don't really worry about if the packet says O or HO. As long as it works, I'm happy. So that's just on there with some carpenter's glue. And just for fun, I had to put some sunshades over the windows and the doors. Well, not doors. It's just 10 thousandths brass. It's a little fun bending into a Z. I actually used a straight edge a straight edge pair of pliers. I've forgotten the specific technical name for what those types of pliers are, but they're not tapered. They're absolutely perfectly straight on both sides. So you can just bend stuff in them. If you're moderately careful. You can do a decent job of it. I didn't want to be more than moderately careful because I want some ripples in it. I want it to look a little crude. I want it to look like somebody grabbed some sheet metal out of the scrap metal around the back of the shop, hit it over the head with a mallet on the anvil and got it to set something that said, oh, that'll work. Stop there. Just glue that in place with some goo and CA, and it's not coming back off. The nut bolt washer castings were drilled through it and stuck in there. They're not to hold that stuff in place. They're just purely ornamental. But now we've got two sides, two ends, and it's time to put things together. It's a little tricky, but strangely enough, it actually does come together. And the point, you got to be careful, is you want to align these tops, that edge with the outside of this edge. So your roof sheathing actually comes down and is flush on the outside. We're close to that, but or whatever tool of destruction you want to use, and smooth it to whatever shape you really like. But once assembled, it just slides down over the flat car sits on the decking nice and smooth. You can see, just for fun, I've added some bracing around the corners, and there's a piece on the back here, because it's just nothing there to hold that back end down. And that's all down there with just a little bit of carpenter's glue. Just slide on it. I put a couple of steel weights on top of it to hold it in place. And yeah, I actually added this piece of wider bracing above the door to keep that piece from splitting. Things have a way of splitting over short distances in scribe siding at the most inconvenient possible time while you're using it. That may be true whether or not it's 1/16 inch scribe siding or 1/32 thick, but just when you don't want it to break at the most critical moment, it tends to be when it will. So throwing a piece of bracing where no one will notice it discourages that from happening. If you can do it quickly, it's worth doing. Well, we put roofing on it. This is some scribe siding, maybe the same scribe siding, in fact. Scribe siding down, so what little of it can be seen, you're not going to see the top anyhow. What little of the scribing marks can be seen will be, you have to flip the car over and look underneath of it. What little bit overhangs here, you can actually see a little bit of it here. Some strip wood for trim work, wrapped all the way around 360 degrees. Just have to cut bevel, angles and bevels and stuff here. Come on, cursor, behave there. It's not a big deal. Sharp knife, number 10 or number 15 scalpel blade works wonders for cutting these things. That's a 15 scalpel blade, not a number 15 X-Acto blade. They're not the same thing when you get to number 15. And I've added some build-up ladders. These are laser cut little kit pieces from BTS. They're mildly annoying to put together. They look good once you got them together. They're mildly annoying because the rungs are a little wider than the openings in the sides of the ladder. So you have to go back and adjust every single rung so it drops in place, stays where you want it to. And when you build 4 of them, it takes a little bit of time. It's not impossible, it just takes time. So there's 2 more. And you can see I had to bevel these down a little bit so they actually fit in the sides of the ladders. Otherwise, they just don't fit in the hole. That's my biggest complaint about laser cut items, is that sometimes things don't fit in the holes. They laser cut a hole for you, but it's 10% small. And then they make 400 of them or 4,000 of them. And that's all you can find on the market, though. Well, in any case, that's where we're at. I think I may or may stop here, in fact. Hey, guess what? I am stopping here. So this is a quick build. I'm going to do this in 2 sessions. And we're going to avoid deep philosophical discussions on parts and dimensions thereof. It's more to demonstrate. You can put something together pretty quickly if you want to. So there's questions. Now's the time to throw them at me. Give me a chance to duck first.
Hey, Martin, this is Jeff Jordan. I got a question for you using the scribed siding.
Yeah.
Do you do something to prevent it from splitting when you're cutting in the windows and door openings, like pre-drilling the corners or putting tape on the back or something like that?
Nope.
So it's thick enough that it's not going to split on you?
Well, I've been doing it. I've been cutting it for 20 years with scalpel blades, and you take your time with it. Yeah, startled me. Spotlighted me. No, I tend to cut a cross grain first, and then down the other directions.
Oh, that makes sense.
So yeah, leave the direction with the grain intact until you're ready for it to go. So you want to relieve the stress on it by cutting cross grain first. Cross grains cutting is harder, but it's you make 5, 6, 7 passes until you get it to come through the other side, and then I'll cut the with the grain directions. And it's usually there's at least one of those who is not on the scribe mark, so you do need a steel ruler to make sure you're close to straight.
Martin, I'm going to ask you a question that I know there's no perfect answer to, but I know that you're so intelligent and so brave that you're going to have the answer. When you cut this with the scalpel,
yeah,
how much pressure do you put on the scalpel?
Quite a lot, actually. Probably a lot more than you're supposed to use with a scalpel, because they are moderately fragile, but that's experience. I mean, you can push them pretty good. You can push them. I'm not sure you can push them as hard as you can push a X-Acto blade, but I've broken one of those. I've broken those a couple of times, but that was a very, very long time ago. It's also good to have, and I do, at least 3 of each blade I'm using in handles at the same time. I have 7 or 8, maybe 9 scalpels on my bench at any given moment. And the handles actually have colored tape on them, so I know which one's which on age. As it gets worn, I set that one aside for other purposes, and they get dull fairly quickly. They're not designed for cutting wood. Flesh tends to be their forte. But yeah, so using the number 11, yeah, or when I'm cutting thicker stuff, the number 22 or number 23, that's the next size up handle. It's a much larger blade.
But what I'm trying to get at is, you said if you're cutting cross grain, you may take 3, 4, 5, 6 different cuts. How much pressure per cut? In other words, I know that you can put enough pressure on it to make one cut and it's through.
No,
but you're putting enough pressure on it to get 1/5 of the way through each time you slice it. Now, my question to you is, how much is that pressure?
Oh gosh, I wish I knew how to measure that. I don't have a tool for that. That's practice and experience. I mean, you just have to try it. But I'll tell you, the first 2 or 3 cuts, you're not putting a lot of pressure on it because you want to stay on your line. You do not want it to wander off wherever being perhaps your thumb or other fingers, but on your other hand. So the first couple of cuts, you're really more engraving, etching.
You're almost laying the scalpel on the wood and just kind of dragging it across.
Well, the first one is really, you're drawing a line that you can see. You're putting a groove in the wood so you can actually see. Okay, now made my initial cut. I've drawn my line with a scalpel blade. The next one you can put a little more depth into because it's going to stay in that groove you just cut. So that first time you draw the scalpel across is the one you're using to really describe where you want that blade to go in the future.
I think, Martin, you're trying to tell them that it's your guide point, the first cut.
Yeah.
Guide you.
Yeah, that's really what the first one is. It's a guide point.
Yeah, the other thing I think that, just a comment, Martin, that depending on the wood you're cutting, if you cut where the grain is running into the knife, so that, if the grain is running away from the knife as you're cutting, it'll pull the knife away from your straight edge here. If the grain is running in the grain of the wood, sometimes you turn the wood 180 degrees.
Yes.
It's better to cut because you want the grain to run into the knife so that it pulls the knife against the straight edge versus the grain running away where it pulls it away from the straight edge. Because that's what'll get you off track really quickly, is the grain of the wood grabbing the knife and pulling it away from the straight edge. So look at that when you cut. Always make sure you're cutting that. And I don't know what to call it. It's like the grain has to run into the knife, so it's dragging the knife into the straight edge. Anyway,
I'm sure there's a technical name for it, but you're right. And but that's why you want to do your first 2 or 3 cuts to avoid that. We want to avoid ruining your cut and cutting yourself. It's safety second or first. It depends on how valuable the piece of wood is. It also matters, as I was going to say, depends on what kind of wood it is. I mean, most of the time we're talking about basswood, or some of us may be using balsa. Some of the dimensional lumber I have is actually red cedar. Some of it's pine, not sugar pine. It's white pine. Kapler used to sell all kinds of different types of wood in O scale, HO scale, dimensional lumber. And while I have that on the tip of my tongue, Kapler's up for sale. Yeah. So anybody who wants to go into business of producing lumber for modeling, talk to Eric at Kapler. He wants to sell you his company.
This is something, this may seem like a trivial kind of thing, but it's something that I had to spend a lot of time and effort learning. Now, maybe it comes with experience. Maybe I'm a slow learner. I don't know. But I have ruined a lot of cuts before I finally figured out how to try to get them to where I didn't destroy what I was trying to cut before I needed to.
That's really the foundation of modeling. I mean, there's more to building than just gluing things together.
Yeah. And there's more to building than just, we talk about, well, and I cut out the window and cut out the door, and I've been doing it 20 years. It's no big deal, but it is a huge deal. For a guy that is trying to figure out, I want to build that car that I just saw Martin build, and oh geez, I just broke the wood because I pushed too hard or whatever.
Well, I do break one occasionally. It does happen. I guarantee you, things happen. And sometimes I do break the scalpel blade too. I broke one yesterday. Yeah. And got lucky. The blade went, one end went one way and the rest of it went over there, and neither one hit me or anything else important. That was a number 10. So, there's several types of blades. It takes practice using them all. And as I noted, the number 15 I use, the scalpel, it's not the same as a 15 X-Acto blade. It's like a miniature number 10. And I find that to be an incredibly useful blade for separating laser cut parts from the surrounding wood. And I was putting together a park bench, laser cut park bench, very ornate scroll work on the ends today. I could barely see all the little tiny scrolls on it, but I was looking for the piece to cut, but the number 15 was the one to use. And it's very handy to have a variety of these blades. I mean, just keeping the number 11 and number 10 around on the bench, be it X-Acto or not, that's probably not enough. I do like having the 22 or the 23. It looks like a small kitchen knife, but it's very good for cutting large lumber. And of course, if I get larger than that, I just go to the bandsaw.
Yeah, Martin, I think the biggest thing we have to remember is to have a sharp tool all the time.
Yes. Well, that's why I said
more people get cut from dull tools than they are from the sharp one.
Yeah, it's don't be afraid to change the blades in these things, because dull one, and that's why I said I keep 3 of them. I have 3 11s and 3 10s on my bench, but I know which one's which because I color code the handles when I change the blades out. And you know, when I want the one that's good enough, I'll get the one that's good enough. But if I want, like, when I'm cutting the fresh, when I'm cutting like a painted tar paper roof overhang, the excess that's been glued onto a car, I'm going to reach for my brand new blade because that's painted paper. It's thin, but I don't want to tear the paper. I want a perfectly clean cut without any resistance beyond it. So, you know, that one I will get a brand new blade, cut that. I'll show you what I'm talking about next week, but where I did that. But it's there's a time and a place for changing blades, and when in doubt, change it.
Got it. Martin, thank you so very much. I didn't want to bother you with trivial questions. To me, this is important. So thanks so much.
Yeah, it's worth mentioning, this year I sprung for a box of 120 blades rather than buying them 5 at a time. And you know, and you're in the middle of the project and you use up the 5th blade. I no longer worry about it. I've got 100 blades left in the box, and if I think it's getting dull, I chuck it and put on another one.
Yep. I'm getting, you know, I'll be buying I buy a box of 100. And don't even blink, just keep going. It's better to have a good tool in your hand that's sharp and ready to use than take, you know, risk making a mess.
It is, no question.
And remember, the mess might be you. So that roll of adhesive tape in the shop can be useful as well.
Thanks so much, Martin. I appreciate it. All right. With that said, we need to turn to Tom Farrell, who is, I think, laying some track tonight and showing us, I think, his layout tonight.
How are we doing?
Doing well. You?
Good. Yeah, I'm going to feature tortoise slow motion switch installation this evening on 2-inch foam, which is sort of tricky. And I think it's interesting. Everybody's talking about safety. I'll have a slide. Well, I'll just surprise you, but if you're squeamish, don't look at that slide. That's all I'll say. So I'm going to switch to my desktop here. Wrong one. Hold on. My glasses on so I can actually see what I'm doing here. Slideshow. There we go. Okay. That's all working, I assume?
Yes.
Okay, good. Well, as I said, this evening is going to be on tortoise machine installation on 2-inch foam. It's somewhat more complicated than working off of a plywood base, as you'll see. This is a photograph. Every week I feature a photograph of my old layout. This was a custom scratch-built covered bridge. It took quite a bit of scale lumber to make this scale bridge, and it's not a prototype. I looked online and basically, let me get my slide thing. Yeah, there it is in color. I looked online and looked at example covered bridges. And I took some of the best features from each covered bridge and I incorporated them in my covered bridge. And this thing just consumed wood like a fire. I mean, there's an enormous amount of strip wood there, and there's over 8,000 shingles, hand-cut shingles on that roof, placed individually with super glue, one at a time with tweezers. So it took quite a while to do this thing, but it was one of the show pieces on my first version of my rustic buff and old Gothic railroad. Just a neat model. It's about 16 inches long, roughly. Anyway, onto the tortoise machines. The first thing I did is, I placed the turnout on. I use cork road bed. I put the cork road bed down with rubber cement, and then I marked where the turnout would go. The back, if you see the in red there, let me see if I get a highlighter here. Yeah, so if you see this red line and these red lines, that's the location of the turnout. And I tried to center it on the cork here. So the cork is split. And right in here is a hole that goes through the turnout bar. And that's where the wire comes up from the tortoise machine to throw that turnout. So what I did is I put a little brad in there and marked the cork, and then I marked it with a marker there to locate where I would, the penetration would be for the spring wire. Now if I just get this thing to turn, there we go. When you buy a tortoise switch machine from Circuitron, they give you an instruction sheet that has a drilling template. And this is the template. I just took a copy of it on my printer, made a copy, cut it out, and on a 3" by 3" by 3/8 piece of plywood that I cut on my table saw, I rubber cemented this template onto the plywood. And then I outlined the template on the photo on the right, and then I colored in where the location of this mounting plate is going to go. Basically, the concept here is this mounting plate is going to be flush with the foam, not flush with the cork, but flush with the foam. I highlighted the circular saw because I had intended to have at least a dozen of these tortoise machines installed, but I had a little accident with my table saw. You guys keep talking about accidents and being careful. Well, I didn't hit my fingers with the blade, but I had what's called a kickback. I don't know if anybody's ever had the pleasure of running a table saw and getting a kickback. But it really messed up my hand. Fun. I didn't cut it with a blade. The little plywood kicked back and slammed in my hand, and I had to go to the emergency room. So be careful with table saws. I've been running this table saw for 40 years. I've had 2 kickbacks. This was the second one in 40 years. Anyway, be careful. I like to say, 1 weak moment in front of a table saw and you can have an accident. So be careful. 4 days after the mishap, I did return to the table saw and I cut my additional blanks, but I did not have time to place additional turnouts. But I'll show you how I put in the first one anyway. It was the prototype. So if you recall from the previous slide, I took my template from the 3" by 3" plywood, and with an X-Acto knife, I began cutting the perimeter out and then peeling away some of the foam. So the idea is to create a ledge 360 degrees around that square hole there. And then with a keyhole saw, I just cut out a square to allow room for the tortoise machine. As you see, I had some interference there with the bench work, which is no big deal. If you guys recall how robust my bench work is, if I notch that bench work, it's not going to make any difference. So that's what I did. I just cut that little piece of interference out with an I can't even say it, a special saw that vibrates with a blade on it. Oscillation saw, I think, something like that.
Reciprocal.
So one of these vibrating saws, with a flat blade. Anyway, one that I couldn't hurt myself with. So I got that all prepared and ready to drop in. And this was the mount that I came up with for the tortoise machine. So You can see that 3" by 3" plywood there. Now there's a gap between the plywood and the turnout. That's where the cork road bed would go. Now I didn't want cork road bed in there because it's too weak. So I glued a thin piece of plywood and a little spacer of basswood to bring that level. If you look on the photo on the right, you have the tortoise machine on the bottom, the plywood, and then you have another piece of plywood and a spacer, and I super glued that turnout to the top of that plywood there. So this is a whole like pop-in module, if you will. I couldn't really figure out another way to do it. And this is looking straight on. You can see the layering process. So there's on the left, you see the plywood, see another piece of plywood, a basswood spacer, and then the turnout itself. And this just drops right into the hole like that, bang, and it's in. And it's perfectly flush. Now my scheme is to not solder this in place, but to use just rail joiners on all sides of this turnout. And if I have a maintenance issue, theoretically I can pull it out. There's a couple of modelers that actually don't glue their ballast down. Al Judy, for example, all his ballast is loose. For this turnout, the rest of the layout's going to have glued ballast, but I'm going to experiment with loose ballast around this turnout just in case I have to pull it out. Maybe I'll glue them in later, but that's my my concept at the moment, is to just have loose ballast around this. There's guys that have whole layouts that are I'm not necessarily a proponent of that, but it's just too difficult to get access to the tortoise machine or the spring that's on the tortoise machine to throw that turnout. So at least in the beginning, I'm not gonna cement these in place. I intend to control these turnouts with Ken Hunter from Barrett Hills, his touch toggles. And I've ordered all the touch toggles for this portion of the layout. They should be arriving this week. So I'll make some touch toggles will be standalone push buttons, if you will. You know, they're capacitive discharge. They're flush switches that have no physical movement. You just put your finger on them and they actuate. Some of them will just be put into the layout near the turnout, and then where there's a concentration of turnouts, I'll have a control panel that'll have these capacitive touch controls. I'll have a whole if these devices come this weekend, perhaps I don't know about next week, but maybe the week after, I'll have this whole side of the layout wired with the Barrett Hills touch toggles, and hopefully have the control panel in for the concentration of turnouts. So take some questions. If anybody has any questions.
Tom, this is Jeff Jordan. I'm also thinking about loose ballast, but I'm concerned about the loose ballast granules getting between the points and the stock rail.
Yeah, that's an issue. I think I can selectively glue things in, just so long as I don't glue the turnout into the layout. So to answer your question, perhaps in between the rails, I can glue the ballast. You know, anywhere that I'm not going to physically adhere my turnout drop-in module, if you will, anywhere, you know, I think that would be a compromise. You follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, because I also believe in not gluing down your turnouts and letting them basically be kept in place by the rail joiners. The rest of my rail is glued down, but not the turnout itself. And it's partially for that reason. So you can adjust it, you can remove it, and you don't get glue in the turnout.
Yeah, I mean, to eliminate, maybe some guys don't know, but to help you not get glue in the turnout, one little trick is to put a plastic compatible oil around any of the moving parts. So if you do use a water-based, like an Elmer's glue or a matte medium to glue it down, if you have oil around the moving parts, it's got to be a oil that's compatible with plastic. You won't have that problem. Just a little.
Oh, that's a good thought. We all probably have the LaBelle oil around to oil our locomotives. You
That's what
probably
I
could
use.
A little bit of that.
It's probably the most expensive oil you could use for that particular application, but that's what I used. So it just keeps you from fouling the turnout with glue. You liberally soak it around any of the moving parts, like the throw bar and the any of the. It's worked for years for me. I've never had a turnout freeze up because of glue or met medium. Yeah.
Tom, how's your hand now?
It's okay. I took the bandages off a couple days ago. I'm probably going to lose my fingernail, but it never really hurt so much. It just hurt when I first did it. Like I hit myself with a hammer. I mean, it really, really hurt when I did it. And that it was bleeding pretty good. And of course, my wife's in Bethesda, Maryland, and I'm here all by myself. And I drove myself to the ER. And I wasn't even going to go to the ER. I don't know how many of you know Tim Milena. He's one of my go-to guys in the hobby, him and Al Judy. I called Tim and told him what I did. He said, get your tail to the ER. And so I can thank Tim Milena for me going to the ER. And I didn't break anything. It just hurt like a SOB, I'll tell you.
Well, listen, I'm really interested to hear how you deal with this loose ballast, because when I heard Al talk about it, I thought, geez, I've never considered doing anything like that. I've never heard anybody that does that. And so I'm really interested to see how it works for you and what compromise you end up making.
Yeah, his entire layout is loose ballast. And in fact, his whole layout
is loose.
Would fall apart. You know, it's all loose. I glue everything down, and I'm like you say, I'm gonna try it, and I'll not glue in my module, if you will, you know, the whole assembly. I just think it's critical. I don't know how I know that if you guys are familiar with tortoise machines, you know, there's a spring, a wire that from my photo. I know that's going to go out of adjustment at some point. And if it's buried in the layout and glued down, it's going to be a real headache, you know? So we're going to go with rail joiners and loose ballast and see how that works out.
Tom, thanks so much. Look forward to hearing from you next week.
Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, now we need to turn to Earl Hackett, who is finishing up his build, his 3D printed structure that he finishes tonight for us. And Earl, welcome. I really do appreciate you doing this.
Hi there. Yep, I'm going to finish this. It's going to be a very short one because all I have to do to finish it is put the windows in. So let me get this thing up here. Let me share the screen. Share. Boom, there we go. Come on, start the thing. I have to click it twice. That's right. There we go. So this is part 5, final assembly, which really isn't that much.
I'm just seeing you.
Oh, you are? Oh, wait a minute. Share screen. Share screen. Okay. How's that?
Yep.
Okay, got it. Okay. So we're just, this is the final assembly, which is really just putting the windows in. Again, this is the model we're building. it's the plans for this. This is as built. This is how the building was built. The plans that you can find somewhere on net or have been published elsewhere. There are minor differences. For example, the steps. The steps were not built like this. So I always go for the photographic evidence and build from the photograph. Well, the windows, I build them with separate sashes, and it's a very simple print. We have a little notch in here for the upper sash to sit in, and the lower sash can be positioned anywhere, up and down. So you can actually open the windows up, so some of them being open. When I do the depot, I noticed that in the photographs, a lot of them showed the upper sash being pulled down as well as the lower sash being pulled up. So for that, I'm just going to take this stop here and move it down a little bit so we can lower the upper sash on those for the depot. The sashes themselves, I printed in long strips like this. These have been sprayed with a white primer, so like the latex paints will stick to it. When I was spraying them, I put tape on the ends to hold them down flat so that they don't make a great big mess of it. And after this window here was a reject. I messed it up pretty bad, so using it just for illustration purposes. It was sprayed both sides with the white primer. So when I spray the dark gray for the one side, I just spray it on, and the other side of this is the other side of this one is white. The other side of this one's black. You don't have to mask anything. It just give it a quick blast with a spray and it's done. For gluing them in, I use my favorite glue, which is Welder. And I just dab a few spots of it along here and along here. And when you push that into the window opening, it basically squeezes the glue back in against this flange here, and you have no squeeze out on the outside of the model. And that stuff holds like you wouldn't believe. It's the best adhesive I've ever seen. So here's the finished model. This little guy back here, this is the filter house. It wasn't a part of the original structure. It was built as an add-on to filter water coming into the building. And it was originally shown in the drawings as being actually an extension, just plugged right onto this corner of the building. But further documentation showed it being as a separate structure. And so that's how I built it. This is the back side. Now this is my first shot at building a multi-piece printed model. It came out all right. There were some mistakes made along the way, and I just said, well, we're just going to live with them. The bigger models, this is a learning process, and we should do better on the next one. But the whole thing is mounted on a piece of 1/4-inch plywood, and that will be mounted in the on the layout. You can see here, if you look at here, you'll notice that the floor is not installed yet, and there's a reason for that. I got a topographic map of the area, and these are 2-foot contour lines, 2 feet between lines, and the bunkhouse sits right in this general area. I think it's actually sitting against this building. I go back to the foundation for this building still exists there at Thurman. And so I know that the bunkhouse is right next to it. The question is, I think this is the one that that's still there. This one here is an rectangular shape. This one here is almost square. So I suspect the bunkhouse is right in this area here. But you can see it's on a pretty steep grade. And that's why I have those big long pilings on there. So that eventually I just lift the building up. When I put it in, I have to build the fill in underneath to fill in to simulate the grade. That's going to be a bit of a trick. But this is the topo map laid on top of my track diagram. This line, these three lines, these are the two main lines, and this, you can see it matches pretty darn well. And I'll be taking dimensions off of the topo map and integrating them into the line. So I'm not going to be able to hold the normal 2-inch clearance here. It's going to be a 1 and a little over 3/4 of an inch clearance between center lines. Because that's the prototype dimensions, and this is going to be. I have very little room to play around with in here, so it's going to be tight. It'll be pretty precise track work here. So anyway, that's where we are, and it's all done, and it'll be hopefully be installed in the next year or so. Anybody have any questions?
I think you've done a beautiful job, Earl. I think I even understand a little bit about 3D printing now that I did before. So thank you so very much for doing this.
Okay. Take care now.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Well, listen, I was going to talk to you a little bit tonight about your modeling and what you model. But it's kind of getting late, so I'm going to postpone that discussion until next week. So I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I apologize again for the minor problem that we had early on. We don't know what the problem was, but we got it solved. And we will get the full show on YouTube as soon as we can. But thank you so much for understanding. Thank you so much for being here tonight. And now I think we'll go to our caboose for the evening. And this caboose, we're not sure what part of California this is from. Could be Los Angeles. There's no. This has really been a great night for us. I mean, if it could go wrong, I think it's gone wrong. But
that was. Let me.
You're breaking up, Phil. I can't understand you.
Let me see if it works this time.
Okay.
You're saying that, Jim, this is the Hollywood Hills?
Yeah, I think it is. I'm not sure. It's either that or Don. Tom Farrell will probably include that on one of his beautiful dioramas that he makes for his layout. Thank you so much for everybody being here this evening. I hope you've enjoyed the show. Most importantly, I hope you've learned something. Look forward to seeing you next week. Happy modeling until then. Until then.